Ray Pritchard, so great to see you, mate. And g'day from down under. So glad that we could connect during this crazy time in our world. I can't believe that the world has this consistent global goal right now. It feels like everyone in the world with one big goal of trying to flatten the curve. And it's actually, I don't mean to be humorous, but it's actually a goal that I've been working on for a long time of trying to flatten my own curves. And hopefully we can accomplish both here in the very near future. I think that would be great. Hey, Ray, do me a favor, mate. For those that are listening, we have known each other for a long period of time. And man, I'm so thankful for your friendship and for you and Marlene and your family and the support that you guys have been to us. But I would love it if you would maybe just introduce yourself to those that are listening. You've been pastoring for a long time. You're the founder and president of a ministry called Keep Believing. But where did it all begin? Where'd you go to school? And then maybe tell us where you pastored.
Well, a long time ago in the last century.
Yes.
I grew up in a small town in the southern part of the United States where Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee all come together. I was raised in a doctor's family, a lot of medicine in my background. And like a lot of kids of my generation, I went to church every Sunday morning. My parents made sure in Sunday school and in church, and I got involved in the youth group and all of that. And I only mention that to say that, like a lot of kids, I got into religion and I got into the church, but I didn't know the Lord. Now, I didn't know that I didn't know the Lord, but at the age of 9, through a lot of circumstances, I walked the aisle in the Southern Baptist church that we were attending and met Brother J.O. Colley, our pastor. He shook my hand, patted me on the head, said he was so glad that I was joining the church. Dr. Pritchard's son was joining the church and welcomed me into the church. But you know what, Perko? Nobody ever said to me, "Do you know Jesus? Are you born again?" Nobody ever asked me.
Wow.
And in fact, I joined the church, I was baptized, and I got super involved. I was one of the leaders of our youth group and all of that. It wasn't until I was 16 years old, we were having a youth retreat. Ironically, I was one of the speakers on the youth retreat. I preached the opening message. Thank God there are no tape recordings of that message when I was 16 years old. It has completely disappeared. And the next morning, some young people came from one of the local universities. They were part of an early group of folks from Campus Crusade for Christ, now called Cru. And you know what? There's nothing to cure you of religion like meeting somebody who has a living, personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Because between the time I was 9 and the time I was 16, it's not as if I thought I was saved or lost. If you'd asked me, "Are you saved?" either the question would have baffled me or I would have said, "I'm a church member." But I heard that the life-changing message of a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, gave my heart to Jesus, June 21st, 1969. 1 year later, graduated from high school. And in June of 1970, I felt the Lord was calling me into full-time ministry, off to college, off to a Christian college in Chattanooga, Tennessee. That's where I met Marlene. We met, started dating, fell in love, graduated, got married, moved to Dallas, Texas, started 4 years at Dallas Theological Seminary, then off into the pastorate in Los Angeles, Dallas, and Chicago. 27 happy years, good times, tough times, everything that you can go through in the pastorate. And in 2005, the Lord called us away from a really happy ministry there in Chicago. It was one of those times that, you know, sometimes there are times when what the Lord is doing, you look back and you kind of scratch your head and you say to yourself, you know, I'm glad I didn't know all the future because I might have been scared to do it. Yeah. But God called us, we took a step, and in early 2006, we started this ministry, Keep Believing Ministries, which first started on the internet and then giving away our little gospel book called An Anchor for the Soul, now a radio ministry, and now a ministry in China. I'll tell you what, this whole coronavirus thing, to bring it to what you and I are thinking about so much, it has certainly shown us, hasn't it, the fragility of this life, the vulnerability we all feel. We like to think we're so advanced technologically. People say to me, and I'm a typical preacher, Perko, I'm wandering away from your question now, but don't get
That's
this what
okay.
I'm
That's
about.
okay.
Uh,
That's okay.
you know, people say to me, can God still speak today? I want to go, are you kidding me? Can God speak today? Look, he's got your phone number on speed dial. He can ring at any time of the day or night, and you will not put the Almighty on call waiting. Listen, when God wanted to get the attention of the whole wide world, he didn't start with a bomb or a plane. All it took was a little invisible virus to bring the world to its knees. So I say to myself, what's my part in what God is doing in the world today? I want to be a dispenser of hope and encouragement, because
Yeah.
there is fear, trepidation, and panic. Just here in the States in the last 2 weeks, 10 million people have moved off the employment roll to the unemployment roll. They're saying next week it's going to be, actually, people are scared to say what's coming next week because nobody really knows. Well, we know who does know.
Yeah.
And I want to be a dispenser of hope to help people believe and to keep believing in Jesus. That's sort of the journey that brought me from where I was to where we are today.
So Ray, you and I connected shortly after Keep Believing Ministries got started then in the mid 2000s at a little place called Word of Life in Scroon Lake, New York, way upstate New York. And we got connected, and I didn't realize that Keep Believing was so young, was really in its infancy. But one of the things that I noticed right out of the gate, every time I chatted with you, you were an early adopter of leveraging digital platforms to do ministry. Like, even as you mentioned a minute ago, Keep Believing started out as an online ministry, but you have continued to leverage tools, as I've followed you now for 15 years or so, of digital ministry and digital platforms to do ministry. And yet, just looking at you, Ray, I don't mean to be unkind, but you are not the quintessential millennial. How is it that somebody, or if you don't mind sharing, Ray, I'd love to know how old are you right now?
Look, I'm old. I'm old enough to be the grandfather of most of the millennials. I'm 67 years old.
Yeah,
I was much younger, Perko, when you and I first met at Word of
sure.
Life up at the campground, now called the
Yeah,
Pines. I mean,
yes,
I'm not a millennial. I'm much
yeah,
older than all the millennials. And I think about this. It's just the way God works. If
yeah,
I can roll back the clock back to about 2000, 2001, um, I began to hear about this thing called a blog, a web blog,
yeah,
and our church had a church in Chicago had a website. And I said, give me a page. I just want a page of it. And I started writing on my page. And I would just talk about articles, and I would put in little hyperlinks.
yeah,
And that was back when that was hard to do. It was
yeah,
hard to do. The kids don't understand. That used to be really,
yeah.
really
You
spell
almost
check.
you almost had to have a computer science degree to add a hyperlink to a web page back then. That was a
That's
big deal.
exactly right.
Yes.
Spell check. We really didn't even have spell check
Yeah.
back in the beginning, which is why those early blog entries had a whole bunch of,
Spelling
typos.
mistakes. Yeah.
But here's the crazy thing. I started discovering that by writing, I'll just talk about who I saw, a book I read, somebody I happened to meet, a conversation I had in the coffee shop. My church members started reading it. Visitors to the church started reading it. Then people around the country started reading it. Then people overseas started reading it. Then eventually, it took a while, but eventually we got visitors to our church who said, I didn't know anything about you. Never even heard of this Ray Pritchard guy, but I saw you on the internet,
Yeah.
and we're in Chicago, and we decided to come by and visit your church. I discovered that the internet was the most powerful tool. I think it's the most powerful tool since the invention of the printing press hundreds of years ago.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting, Ray. As I think about it, we are in a sense right now self-isolating, and in some ways you could call it like home imprisonment or house
Yes,
arrest,
yes,
possibly. And we
yes.
all know about a very famous guy in the first century who spent a lot of time under house arrest using the technology of his day to write letters and to communicate from house arrest. And I'm thinking to myself right now in this season that we all find ourselves in, is it possible that God is calling each of us to leverage whatever platforms, whatever tools he makes available to us to reach those that are around us with the technology that we've been given, which I think you've done so incredibly well, Ray. Any thoughts on that before I ask you another question?
Just this, speaking of the Apostle Paul, when he went to Athens, he got up on Mars Hill and he preached, because that's where the people gathered. I've been to Mars Hill, I've seen it. But down there, just down the right below Mars Hill, is the agora, the marketplace. Paul went down to the marketplace, and that's where he argued with the Stoics and the Epicureans and the other Greek philosophers. Now, why did he leave Mars Hill and go down into the valley? Because that's where the people were. That's where they met. That's where they congregated. That's where they talked. That's where they discussed. That was the agora, the marketplace. That was the social media of the first century. Paul is our example. He went to the synagogues. That's where the people were. He went to the debating hall. That's where the people were. And in Athens, he went down to the marketplace. God has given us Twitter. He's given us Instagram. He's given us Facebook. He's given us these other things I barely know anything about. There's so much out there. How can we not leverage those for the cause of Christ? These are gifts. The world has figured out how to use them. We've got the best good news the world. We've got the message of hope right now the world needs. I want to use every tool that God puts in front of me to get the good news out to people who need to hear it.
I love it. I love it. I think Paul would have been probably one of the most prolific social media influencers if he was alive today. I think he would have been one of those people.
He would be tweeting and mixing it up. And, he could be salty too. People think, Paul's a tough guy. He could give it and he could take it. He spent a lot of his time debating in the synagogues. He would debate in the debating hall there in Ephesus. He would debate. He would love social media.
He would love it. He would love it. He would get into it. I'm absolutely certain. So, Ray, tell us a little bit about your adopting of social media. Let's be completely transparent. There are some people, I would say, in your demographic that, quite frankly, are a little bit critical of it and can sometimes be opposed to it, that kind of thing. You have embraced it. But I want to hear some practical things that you do beyond just broadcasting a service online or beyond just broadcasting a talk or something online as far as delivering content. I know that you and Marlene both actually leverage social media to do what I like to refer to as personal ministry in people's lives, not just broadcasting a talk or a message or a service. Talk to us about some practical things that you do on social media that you feel like allows for personal engagement.
Here's the thing we have discovered. I got into Facebook very early on, and you're right. A lot of people in my demographic weren't in it back then. Now, here in 2020, everybody, that has really changed. You want to see your grandkids, you get on Facebook, you get on Twitter, Instagram, something like that. But back then, people didn't really understand it. In that day, which was only 12, 13 years ago, the number one way people found Keep Believing Ministries was through our website. Okay. And I spent a lot of time building the Keep Believing website. Oh, how that has changed. Almost nobody finds us directly now by the Keep Believing website. Almost nobody. Number one way people find us now is by Facebook. And the number two way is by Twitter. Number three is because we've shown up somewhere on Google. And then maybe Instagram we're just beginning to develop that now. So I know that if I spend time on social media, that's how people are going to meet me, get to know Marlene. People write in. Okay, let me just do this. Let me see if I can do this. The way people get in touch with me now. I should have written this down. Okay, Instagram is one way. Twitter direct message is another way. The Keep Believing Facebook page, the Ray Pritchard Facebook page. They can text me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm working LinkedIn, and people contact me that way. And then there's one more that I'm not thinking of. I counted you. Oh, I know, email, old-fashioned email.
The
That's
old-fashioned email.
7 different ways. It's 7 channels I have to check. And if you ask me how many times a day do I check those 7 channels, probably 15, 20 times a day. I'm
Yeah.
checking it all the time, all the
Yeah.
time. So I have discovered that if I want to help people and encourage them, and not just quote sell stuff, because that's really not very satisfying to me anyway. I want to encourage people. They've got to know that they can write me. They've got to know that I'll pray for them. You know what? By the way, ... said the preacher, going off on the side. Let me say something to our ministry friends here. If somebody says, "Will you pray for me?" either stop and pray for them right then, if it's possible, man, not always possible, but if you can, or if they write you, write them back. Not a sentence saying, "I am praying for you." Write them back your prayer.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It does take time.
Yeah.
It does take time. But Perko, I have found so many times people write me, "Would you pray for my uncle? I'm going in for surgery. My husband, my marriage is in trouble." I have found the most encouraging thing I can do is simply write back and say, "Lord Jesus, my friend Catherine is struggling because she's got this COVID-19 and she's worried about what the future is. Lord, I'm coming in Jesus' name on behalf of my friend, praying for a healing power." It takes time, but at least for me, that's one thing I find myself doing more and more and more. Not just saying I'm going to pray for you, but write out the prayer. Doesn't have to be 10 paragraphs, 2, 3 sentences is great.
So meaningful, Ray, so personal for people that are receiving that on the other end. And I think that is really the thing that a lot of ministry leaders right now are wrestling with. Not how do I just show my Sunday service online? I think most churches around the world have been forced to figure that out in the last month or 6 weeks, quite frankly. They're not all great. I've watched some that I'm thinking to myself sometimes, not sure if we should be putting that out there, but that's okay. Some of them are fantastic. I consume a lot of online church because I'm connected with so many ministry leaders. But I think the thing that we're all wrestling with right now is, how do we go beyond just putting our Sunday service online and actually pastor and shepherd our congregations and our community in a meaningful, personal way when all we have available to us is these digital platforms? And I think that, man, that one little suggestion was fantastic, Ray. I think that's a practical way that we can shepherd and pastor people online. What are some other things, Ray, that you feel like right now, because of, and I don't want to focus just on this crisis that we're all facing, but it's relevant. It's where we are today.
Here we are.
So what are some other things that you feel like as a ministry leader you are learning during this time, and some things that you're wrestling with that maybe you still have more questions about than you have answers, that many of us would probably relate to right now?
Okay. Let me tell you, number one thing. I find myself, as I'm talking to you, Perk, I'm kind of leaning forward like this life, right?
Yeah.
Those of us who are type A personalities, we're kind of wired to lean forward into life, you know? And I sort of think of like the throttle on a boat. Most of us in the ministry, most people I know, we go with the throttle pushed all the way forward. It's a very humbling thing to realize you're in your house and you're not going to get out of your house today.
Yeah.
And tomorrow morning when you wake up, you're going to be in your house again, and you're probably not going to get out of it. Maybe you'll take a walk. But the life that you and I knew just a few short weeks ago is gone. And we all hope, well, maybe in 6 weeks or 2 months, it's going to be back. Is there any real guarantee?
Right.
I don't really think so. This is the way I look at it. I speak for nobody else but myself. I find it hard. I go so long this way. I find it very hard to pull that throttle back. I find it easy to go with life stuck in the forward, stuck that way, full out all the time.
Yeah.
One thing I think God's doing for all of us, he is reminding us. I'm reading Psalm 103. Marlene and I have been, that's another thing. I'll get to that. But we
Yeah.
were reading through the book of Psalms, actually listening. I'll get to that too. Okay. But
Yes.
Psalm 103, like a father pities his children, the Lord has compassion on us. He remembers our frame.
Hmm.
He knows we are dust. Dust. That's all we are. We're here today. We're gone tomorrow. It's one good thing about reading the Bible. It'll bring you back down to the proper place.
It gives you perspective, Ray, so much. I remember just the other day I was recalling this phrase that I grew up hearing as a young child in the church all the time. People would use this phrase, Lord willing. And I actually wrote a blog the other day that says, I called it Bring Back Lord Willing.
Yes.
Because as you read that passage in James, Jesus' brother, really before the famous line that most of us think of, that whole your life is as a vapor, it appears for a period, a little period, and vanishes and so on. He gives a warning to people to say, hey, you who say to each other, we're going to go to this town or that town and we'll spend a year there and build a business or a ministry, whatever you want to put in there, and we're going to profit, we're going to do all these things. Man, be careful. You should say, if God wills it, or if the Lord allows, or Lord willing, that I'll go to these places. So it's not as though we stop dreaming, but I think it just puts the right perspective. Like you said, the psalmist gives us perspective and says, we're kind of like dust, or we're like a vapor. So go on though.
So it's just amazing how what you were just saying, I was thinking about in the last 24 hours. Okay, roll the clock back to, say, December 31st, January 1st. How many of us had ever heard of, quote, COVID-19 or coronavirus?
Yes.
Zero.
Yep.
Had no idea. You had your plans, Perko. I had mine. I came into 2020. I had it all laid out, had this travel schedule. I mean, tonight, if everything had worked out right, I was going to be with Marlene up in Chicago. Then this Sunday, we we're going to be in Indiana. Then next week, we we're going to fly to South Korea to teach at the Bible Institute over there. Then we're going to be in Montana to speak at a conference. Then we're going to come back. Everything, all the plans just gone. And I read, you know what? I read the book of James, that passage, a little differently now. Come on now. He says that in the Greek. Come on now. You who say today or tomorrow, come on, guys. You think you've got it all figured out. You got nothing figured out. Wow. And it's easy for, okay, I confess my sins, nobody else's, all right? It's easy for those of us who live life pushed this way to come to this moment and think, I got to, in this timeout period, I got to do something to prove my worth.
Yeah.
Easy to think that. The schedule's gone, the travel's gone. What we got to do? We got to trust the Lord.
Yeah.
As somebody said, oh no, has it come to that?
Yeah. It's like the last resort. All of a sudden we have to do that.
That's like saying, what? We got nothing to breathe but air. We got nothing to eat but food. Oh no, has it come to that? Yes, my friends, it has come to that. So this is what Marlene and I together have been thinking about. It's helped me. And I got to say, slowly, I'm bringing the throttle back now. I'm not saying I'm there yet. This is what we have decided. Got this from some missionaries, again, way back in the last century. Paraguay, Colombia, Nigeria, Ukraine, different places. The life of the missionary, the real missionaries, is not, as you know, it's not all that glamorous. And in certain parts of the world, it's a real struggle. And those missionaries used to say, this is 40 years ago, if we can do one thing, if we can just get one thing done, it may take us all day. We don't ever start out saying we're going to do 5 things. Let's get one thing done. We've adopted that for this timeout period. Monday, let's get one thing done. Yeah. And once that's done, sit down and relax, because we're not going anywhere anyway. Tuesday, let's just try to get one thing done. Wednesday, one. And guess what? Today, Perko, my one thing done was to talk to you.
Oh,
So
wow.
you were my one thing to get done today.
Yeah.
And it's a great day because I'm getting
Yeah.
to talk. And for a guy who's used to, clicking it off, clicking it off, clicking it off, I guess I'm going to say I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
It's where we are. Okay.
I I feel like, Ray, and you've probably heard this before, but I feel as though many of us, especially as leaders, are so driven, and it's almost like our cocaine is our ability to get things done and
Yes.
to achieve and to advance things. And there's nothing wrong with the desire to achieve and advance and so on for the kingdom, as long as it's coming from a great place and a great motivation. But I am convinced that the speed at which we travel is probably not something that's going to help us to develop a really deep spiritual soul healthy inner life. And I've recently just been learning a ton about this whole idea of soul care. I've been learning a lot about the idea of what you described, and I love the speedboat analogy of pulling back on the throttle, because I've been reading a lot of different guys. One of the guys you've probably heard of is Dallas Willard, who said that busyness or hurry is actually the enemy of spirituality. And if you can eliminate busyness and hurry from your life, you'll probably have a much better relationship with Christ and a deeper relationship with Christ. So I would just love to know, Ray, what are some practical things that you and Marlene do, whether together or individually, to help you pull back the throttle? What are some practical things that you guys do to both slow down, but also cultivate that life with Jesus that maintains a healthy soul while you're still reaching an incredible amount of people online and you're still hitting some of your strategic goals? How do you keep a healthy soul?
I think to go back to that image, the real problem we as leaders have is not just that we get stuck, way this way. And it's not just that we have trouble pulling back. I think most of us can take our hands off for a short period of time. And then while nobody else is looking, we grab that throttle again and push it down. And I view this as a period of time where God has said, He said, look, you weren't planning this, but I was always, always. You can keep your hand off of it, and I'm going to take the throttle away from you for a while.
Yeah.
I'm going to have you at home for a while so you can begin to reconfigure. I like this. You kind of mean the contours of the soul. So in our I'm coming to you from my office in the basement of our home. We're a tri-level, but we live mostly on that middle level. And there, got our bedroom there, and I'm actually pointing and showing you where it is.
I
It's
love
right
it.
bedroom right up above me, and then the kitchen's right over there. But in between, there's this little dining room nook. And Marlene said we ought to put a little kind of recliner there. So she's got one in this little side of the nook, and just a few feet away, I've got one. And I have to give, first of all, dot, dot, dot. Just in general, Perko, um, over 45 years of marriage, Marlene has always known the will of God before me.
Yeah.
It's intuitively, every major decision, she's figured it out while I'm over there wrestling with it. She just waits for me to figure out what she figured out long ago, right? So I've learned to sort of just sit and listen to my wife. She has been, and this has been so good for us. She has been doing the Bible in 1 year, listening online through.
Okay.
I think right now we're using YouVersion, or we might be
Yes.
using Bible.is.
Yeah.
There's several different places you can go. Well, she's got one where we're listening to the New Living Translation, just
Love it.
modern, contemporary, doing about 5 or 6 chapters a day. And she's right over there. She's in her little side of the nook. I'm on my side of the nook. She's got the cell phone. She punches it in. We started just a couple of weeks, kind of when this whole in-home sheltering thing. She was in the book of of Job toward the end of it. And you know, boy, if you want something to humble you, listen to the end of the book of Job, where Job's got all these questions. Lord, I want to know this. Lord, you know, Lord, explain yourself. And God says, let me ask you a question, buddy. Can you make a bunny rabbit? No. Well, when you figure out how to make a bunny rabbit, come back to me and I'll explain myself to you. Otherwise, just get down on your knees and be quiet. And what a message that is. Folks, I did paraphrase that, but what a message that is for us uptight 21st century people who think that the world depends on us. No, the world does not depend. It's a shocking and humbling thing to me to realize, you know, at the age of 67, I got more behind me than I have in front of me.
Yeah.
I just do. I don't plan to live to be 130, have no real desire to do that. So I'm coming down the home stretch of life, whether it's a year or 5 years or 10 years. And I find it extremely freeing to realize God was doing fine before Ray Pritchard showed up. If I drop over tonight, he'll still be God and the world will still be running and he'll still be on his throne. Oh, what a freeing thing. So I've been listening. We started in Job. Can you make a bunny rabbit? Really, it's more like a crocodile, but still, can you make an ostrich? No. Okay, it's just good to sit and listen. I'm actually trying to answer your question by saying, what a good thing to me. And you know what? Without this coronavirus, and I pray for God to lift it, I pray for the pandemic to end, all of that. But while we are in this period, I wouldn't be doing this with Marlene. I'd be out doing God's work. But now I understand God's work for me and my wife is to sit, her in her chair, me in mine, crank back my recliner, and just listen to the word of God and pray together.
Yeah.
We've done more now than we have in years. What a, and to feel no big time pressure at all.
Yeah.
That's been good. That, you know, sometimes you can just feel something's good for your soul. That's been good for my soul.
I love it, Ray. That is so practical and so helpful. And man, I just am convinced that for many of us as leaders, I'm confessing for myself, not for everyone, but I know that the beginning years of my life were marked by this phrase of being focused more on what I was doing for Jesus than just being with Jesus. And I want the last half of my life to be the reverse. I want to be known as someone that spent a lot of time with Jesus, and what he did for Jesus came out of that. So thank you for sharing that intimate, practical thing that you and Marlene are doing together. I'm so incredibly thankful. One of the focuses of the podcast, Ray, is to help people reach their strategic goals while not losing their souls. And I think you've helped us look at both of those things today. If people want to catch up with you, Ray, what's the best way to find you online or on social media?
Just surf on over to keepbelieving.com.
Yeah.
If you mess up and go .org, we own them both. So come see us, keepbelieving.com. My email, Ray, R-A-Y, at keepbelieving.com. If you put Ray P, it'll come to me. Ray Pritchard, it'll come to me. Dr. Ray, Professor, or whatever. Almost anything at keepbelieving.anything will probably come to me. So you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, or old-fashioned email. Love to hear from you. Love to hear from you.
Yeah. Ray, thanks so much for your time with us today. This has been such an encouragement and so much fun to hang out together. And I look forward to the next time we get to catch up in person. And I'm going to hold you to this. We're going to head up Joe's Barbecue in Kansas City the next time we're together.
Kansas City Barbecue. Here we come. Sounds great,
it.
Perko. Thank you.
I love it.